afternoon. I want to thank you on behalf of Veterans in Politics International for coming today. I got a couple things I want to get out of the way real quick. This endorsement interview is being endorsed by Patsy Brown, who is running for Clark County Public Administrator. And then I also want to thank Dr. Robert Madoff, who has been the one making all the phone calls to get in contact with 500 plus candidates that have filed this year. So I really want to thank both of those individuals. So just to give you a brief overview of how this process works, we'll start by having each panel member will give a 30-second introduction of ourselves, just so you know who's asking you the questions. Once that's done, you'll be given 2 minutes to give a bio about yourself, what office you are running for, and why you want our endorsement. Once a panel member asks you a question, you'll be given 2 minutes to answer their question. I'm not going to be rude and interrupt you mid-sentence, okay? But if I start doing this, that means if you can wrap it up. Okay. And then at the end of the question and answer portion, you'll be given 2 minutes to give a closing statement about why you're the best candidate and also give all your candidate information, contact information. Okay, I'll go ahead and start first. My name is Jim Jonas. I'm Director of Veterans in Politics International, and I also co-host the podcast with Steve Sanson.
Chris Eisenhower, United States Navy veteran, and I'm currently employed by the county as well. Thank you.
My name is Robert Faust. I'm a third generation VFW. My grandfather fought in World War I. My father fought in World War II. I fought in Vietnam. When I returned from the war, I played professional baseball for about 10 years. I recently wrote 2 books that have just been published, so I'm now an author. And I also spent 4 years in federal penitentiary for marijuana.
Okay, Danielle, go ahead.
So, is the camera that way? Yes. Okay, so my name is Danielle Pieper Chio, and I'm running for Las Vegas Justice Court Department number 9. For the past 19 years, I have been a prosecutor both in the city of Las Vegas and in Clark County. For the past 12 years, I have been on the gang unit. For the past 10 of those 12 years, I have been the team chief of the gang unit. Prior to that, I was on the sexual assault unit for 2 years. And prior to that, I was on general litigation. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I think I'm the best candidate, or the reason why I want Veterans in Politics endorsement is because this seat essentially is what the community votes for, and veterans are part of this community.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you an open-ended question, and usually I try not to do this, but doing my research on you, I have found that you are a prosecutor. I haven't found anything bad about that, but perception is reality.
Okay.
So typically when somebody runs for judge, if they have a background being a prosecutor, then the public automatically assumes that you're not going to be as open-minded to defendants. How would you respond to that question?
I think that that's an assumption that's not fair. So one of the things that I have done on the gang unit, so I've been a prosecutor for 19 years. I've done a wide variety of cases. One of the things that I have noticed over the last couple of years is that the defendants that I prosecuted, when I've tried to get them services and help, because I think it's usually easier sometimes for the state to make the phone call as opposed to a defense attorney to make a phone call, is we have lack of resources. I think the perception that all prosecutors, don't understand people, have no background. I was raised by a single mother. I was who had to work 2 jobs to put me through a private school. I have not forgotten where I come from. So I think that I let all of that go and just kind of prosecute people without realizing that people have made mistakes, bad decisions and they need help is unfair. So one of the things that I've done throughout the past probably 10 years of my career is try to get people that I prosecute services and help. And what I've realized is at the legislative level, they've had to make different choices. I think in the criminal justice arena, we don't have the same programs that we used to have. There's a boot camp program that used to be fairly robust that I would put defendants in and try to work with them to that. That program essentially no longer exists. When I've called other programs to try and get some help, they usually ask me if my defendant can pay and or if they have insurance, to which the answer is no, they have neither. And so I have to make a patchwork quilt of different services to be able to help them with.
Could you briefly tell us what party you represent and what religion do you follow?
I'm sorry, did you say what?
Religion.
Okay. So I'm a Christian. Essentially, when I alluded to the fact that I went to a private school. So my mom sent me to an all-girls Episcopalian school in Honolulu, Hawaii. I graduated from there, and then I went to Whittier College, which was a Quaker. Currently, I am a member of Central Christian Church, where I have been going, I almost said religiously, I guess I should say steadily, since 2017.
And what party are you at?
So this is a nonpartisan seat. I am I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. You were talking. So, it's a nonpartisan seat, but I am a registered Democrat. I have been a prosecutor for 19 years, and my husband has been a police officer for 26 years. He's currently a lieutenant with the police department.
Well, there you go, breaking down perception. Because most people just perceive that prosecutors are automatically Republicans.
I would assume that is true, yes.
Okay.
But, look, so at the end of the day, I became a prosecutor because when I graduated from college, I volunteered at an organization called CAS, the Child Abuse Services Team. It was in Orange County, California. So when children would report abuse, they would come to the facility. At the facility, there was therapists, social workers, there was a nurse who did the exam, police officers would go there, there would be a DA that was there, detectives were there, and so it was a multidisciplinary team that came together. I, at that point, still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, to be honest with you, when I grew up, even though at that point I was in college. I made the decision after volunteering there for 2 years that I wanted to be the DA until somebody told me I had to go to law school, and I wasn't a very good student, to be honest with you. So I thought to myself, well, now I got to figure out how to get through this. I became a prosecutor because I wanted to be the voice for victims. And I wanted to be able to help people that were in situations where in that case they couldn't control. There were children who had been abused by an adult. Frequently, they had no voice in the court system. And so that's why I became a prosecutor, was essentially to help people.
Are you currently a sitting judge?
No, I am currently with the Clark County District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor.
So, bail is a pretty predominant question. Everybody wants to get out of jail. So, what do you think about the no bail thing and about the bail situation in general right now?
So in the state of Nevada, a defendant has a right to bail unless they are charged with essentially first-degree murder. I think that when I look at the statutes, the bail statutes in Nevada have not changed. The Nevada Supreme Court has added a case, which is Valdez-Jimenez, which has essentially added another criteria by which a judge has to look at bail, and that is the defendant's ability to afford bail. It does not mean that is the only criteria. It does not mean that you have to set bail in the amount that a defendant can afford. If you are not going to do that as a judge, then you need to say why you are essentially setting bail in the amount that you're setting it. But essentially the statutes have not changed. We still have to look at somebody's, essentially their connection to the community. Do they have a job? Who's willing to stand up for them? All of those things, the crime that was committed, their criminal history, all of those things are factors that the judge has to look at.
Would you take into consideration the prior record of the person before you granted bail?
Yes, because that's a factor, right? So I would look, as a judge, when you're sitting there, you have to look at a person that you essentially can't have a conversation with. There are a myriad of things that you have to look at, and I think that's a factor of maybe 50. And when I say 50, I'm kind of facetious when I threw that number out.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question you have no control over.
Okay.
But no, I just want to be fair, because that's the one thing that, like, when we interview judges, they're like, well, I can't control that. Why are you asking me this question? So I want to make sure. What do you think about, I get frustrated that the legislative branch seems to write these laws and give mandates to judges on minimum sentencing, things of that nature. What's your personal take on that? Because I'm confused, because I think the Constitution's pretty clear on that. The roles of the legislative branch versus the executive branch, the judicial branch, sorry.
So essentially, prior to what we have as the minimum and sentencings on felonies, essentially there was just kind of a number that got thrown out. The only reason why I knew that was that I did the retrial of Richard Habistro, the sentencing case that happened in 1986. And I was confused when I saw the sentencings, essentially because it was just like a number, like life. And I was like, what's the minimum sentencing? And that's when I realized that there was no minimum sentencing. It's my understanding that the legislature then went back and essentially they have a minimum and a maximum sentence. And they did that essentially, I'm assuming, for the parole board. I don't know. As the judiciary, I think what you have to do is you have to follow the law. I mean, my personal belief on a lot of things, I have to put on the side. I have to look at what the law is, and I have to follow the law. To be honest with you, I would never want to be a legislator. That's, there are other reasons for that have nothing to do with criminal justice. But I think essentially, if the law in the state of Nevada is that there is a minimum and a maximum sentence, then I think as a judge, you have to follow that.
So,
as a prospective judge, what do you consider your greatest strengths? Maybe even some weaknesses?
I think one of my greatest strengths has been perseverance and tenacity. So I, for the past 14 years, have prosecuted either sexual assault cases or gang cases. Both of those types of victims and witnesses are hesitant to come forward. Sexual assault cases, I don't think I need to explain why. No child wants to sit in a courtroom facing their accuser who is an adult. That's a very uncomfortable situation. In regard to gang cases, people are afraid of retaliation. So one of the things that I've had to do in that capacity is to find other ways to other pieces of evidence to prove the crime, because it is the burden that I have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So we've had to either look at phone evidence, essentially, doing the pinging, where's the phone at the time the person that is accused, the crime was committed, are they in that area? We've had to look at text messaging, we have to look at DNA, we have to look at forensic evidence. There are other things that essentially we've had to do because sometimes we have people that are hesitant to come forward. And then when they are on the stand, they aren't always forthcoming. And sometimes the jury doesn't understand that. So I would say, because I've had to do that for the past 14 years, I've had to find other ways, essentially, to bring justice for those victims.
Okay, so based on your answer to that question, it's obvious that you're qualified to be a judge.
Thank you.
You know the law, you understand the law. That's why it's tough. Asking people questions that most people are qualified. Well, not all, but you for sure.
Thank you.
So anyway, with that being said, why, with all this past experience and all these cases that you've been a part of, why run for justice of the peace? Why not run for district court? Why not run for, and I'm going to be very specific in why I'm asking this question, is because I just want to know, like, do you really want to be justice of the peace? Or is this just a stepping stone for something further?
So I thought about running in the last election. My stepdaughter was a senior in high school, and I didn't think that it was going to be fair to her, especially after what happened with COVID, for me not to be around for her. I thought it was, frankly, a little selfish for me to decide to put my career before what she was going through. And I wanted to be a part of her process for college and, going on trips for college and having a family vacation. When I made the decision to run for justice of the peace, and yes, I do want to be a justice of the peace, I looked at the bench and I looked at the people that were sitting on the bench. And so I strategically picked this seat because I felt that the person that was sitting in this seat was not looking at the entire criteria for bail, for instance. He wasn't looking at safety to the community. And I felt that my experience was something that I could add to the position, and that would help me to make decisions.
So with the pandemic, now coming to a close, but the courts have been shut down for, basically almost 2 years. And, you might have somebody that has a fine, and that fine now is gone to collections, and it's now $500 or $600 when it was like $200 or something. And this, maybe the person's been down to pay it twice, and the court has been closed. So what would you say if they came before you?
So essentially, while the traffic courts have been closed, Justice Court has not been closed for the past 2 years. And I know that because the day of the shutdown, all team chiefs and assistant team chiefs at the Clark County District Attorney's Office had to report to work. So since the pandemic, I have been working. My understanding in regard to the traffic citations is that bench warrants have been recalled, and all the fines associated for the past 2 years have also been recalled. So it's my understanding that people are essentially starting off at when they got the citation. I know that I think it was a couple weeks ago the traffic division opened up, because when I went to court, I saw that it was open. But I absolutely would be willing to work with somebody who comes in and explains to me, look, I haven't worked for 2 years. I've lost my job. I have all these fees and fines. I'm willing to work at it, but I need some time. Absolutely, I would be willing to work with that person because that's human nature, right? If somebody is willing to stand in front of me and appear and tell me that, then I'm willing to work with them. It's a partnership with the community.
Okay. So my next question, it's kind of a loaded question, but at the same time, I think it's pertinent. So plea bargains. We see this all the time, mm-hmm. where if you have enough money to pay for a really good attorney, and the attorney knows the city prosecutor or the city attorney, and they come up with this plea deal, and everybody comes in front of you, would you be willing to look at it and say, no, something's wrong here, this isn't fair? Would you be willing to do that?
Well, sure. But first of all, let me answer. Justice Court, we rarely have that, right? Because we're dealing with essentially misdemeanors, right? Because felonies go on to the next level. Right. As a district court judge, and one of the things that our guilty plea agreements say is that essentially the judge has the final say unless it's a conditional plea. So I think as a judge, you have to look at everything, right? But as a justice of the peace, I essentially I might have some of that, but not all of it. But I mean, I think as a judge, you can ask questions.
Another general question, I guess. Character, again. What are your highlights, or maybe one of your greatest accomplishments of your legal career that might come to mind?
Greatest accomplishments of my legal career. I have to think about that. I think I've had several. A lot of it was the trials that I have done. I alluded to the Richard Hapestro case. That was a case that I think in 2012 or 13, I retried with someone in my office. It was just the sentencing portion of that. The death penalty portion of it had been overturned. And so we had to go back and essentially we were seeking death again. I think for me, the reason why that case is a highlight of my career is because when I met that family, I realized that what had happened to them 27, 28 years ago had not left them. It was as if when we met with them, their daughter had died the day before and they were devastated by what happened. And while whatever we did in the sentencing portion of it would never have brought their daughter back and would never have allowed her to be at Christmases and Easters and birthdays, for me, it was a way to say to them, look, the community cares because we're willing to move forward. Similar to cases that I've tried when I was on the sexual assault unit, we were able to obtain convictions in cases. And while it did not take away what happened to the victim, it was a way to say, hey, look, the community cares. The state of Nevada or the Clark County District Attorney's Office is here for you. And, there is some measure of justice. Your life will never be made whole, which is what I have said to many victims that I meet. The justice system doesn't give you the justice that you rightfully deserve because it never puts you back into a place that you were prior to this crime happening. So what we usually have to work with at that point is healing. Try to have them heal in order to move on with their life in a productive manner.
All right. So my next question is, as a justice of the peace, you have to determine whether a felony or a gross misdemeanor have enough evidence to be bound over to a district court. Mm-hmm. What's your threshold for that?
Probable cause. Slight or marginal evidence that this defendant committed these crimes.
All right. To answer my question. So I guess my next question, I'll just say, I guess only have one. Robert, do you have another question? Because I don't really have any more questions. Danielle, you're very impressive. And I want to thank you very much for coming on. And I know this was short, and I know, I really appreciate you coming and taking your time out on a Sunday. And I really honestly believe that judges are so important. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Since we got plenty of time, as much time as you want to take, just say why you're the best person for this job, your credentials, and make sure you give your campaign contact information as well.
Okay. My name is Danielle Pieper Chio, and I'd like to be your next Las Vegas Justice Court Department 9 judge. I have been a prosecutor for 19 years. Currently, I am the team chief of the gang unit. Prior to that, I was on the sexual assault unit, and I've prosecuted over 50 felony jury trials. You can go to my website, which is danielleforjudge.com. You can email me at danielle@danielleforjudge.com. I'm also on Instagram as well as Facebook, and I appreciate any support that you could give me. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Danielle. And see how easy that is for all of you judicial candidates that don't want to show up? Come in, answer a few questions, get some FaceTime, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, and I want to give a shout out.
Go ahead, Danielle.
I wanted to give a shout out to Patsy Brown and Andre Haynes.
Yeah, I love them both too. I always got to give them both a hard time, but they're both great people, and thank you for doing that.
Four with the number 4. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I guess I should have done that.
Okay, nope, clarifying.
Okay, so that will include our endorsement interview for Las Vegas Justice of the Peace, Department 9.
Thank you.